Do you find yourself repeating the same old patterns, battling with addiction, or sabotaging your own success? If so, you're not alone. And for a lot of people, the reason they are struggling with these things is because there is an underlying fear. And sometimes this is a fear of change, sometimes it is a fear of failure, and sometimes it is even a fear of success. And the thing is, it may not even be a fear that you're fully aware of. But what if you could break free from those chains and overcome those fears that are holding you back and step into your full potential? That is exactly what we have been talking about all week long with our special guest, Adam Jablin from the Hero Project. And on this episode, I'm going to give you my unshakable insights and key takeaways from the week that we just had with Adam. If you have tuned in every single episode this week, first and foremost, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Today's going to just be a recap for you, maybe help you remember some of those things that you might have forgotten over the course of the week. And if you haven't been able to check out any of the episodes, then today's going to help you to get caught up. And that's coming up next. The right habits can help you have it all. More time, better health, improved relationships, and less stress. But most people lack the tools to stick with those habits long enough to see results. That is about to change. Welcome to Unshakable Habits with your host, Stephen Box. It's time to take your habits from unsustainable to unshakable. Welcome back. This is episode number 77 of Unshakable Habits. I am your host, Stephen Box. And this week we are talking all about fear. And specifically, we're talking about the fear of change, the fear of failure, and even the fear of success, and how that fear can keep you stuck in the same patterns, stuck with the same addictions, and continuously sabotaging your own success. This week, we had a special guest, Adam Jablin from the Hero Project, who gave us a lot of great insights this week from his own personal experience of overcoming addiction. And today, I'm going to give you my unshakable insights and my reflections on the things that I took note of during my conversation with Adam this week. We kicked things off this week with our intro episode, and Adam shared a little bit about his story of overcoming alcoholism and addiction, and how really there was a lot of fear in that, right? This fear of changing, this fear of letting go of the old Adam, this fear of finding out, or people finding out who he was. There was just, and more really, there was a lot of different concepts of fear that Adam talked about this week. And he really talked about this idea of the inner hero. And he says, everyone has an inner hero, but it's about recognizing it and then learning how to harness it. And I really like this concept because I think for a lot of us, we can, especially when we're in the grips of fear, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry, we can feel a little helpless. And I love the fact that Adam really is saying, look, we all have that inner hero. We all have that ability to do something to better our lives. We just have to recognize it as there, and then we have to learn to harness it. Adam also talks about how overcoming addiction was one of the hardest battles that he ever faced, but that it taught him the value of resilience and the power of support. And I think this is such a huge thing because when we go through things, there tends to be one or two responses. Either it breaks us or it builds us. And I think for a lot of people, what it really comes down to is the power of that support. Because in my experience, the people who are the most resilient are the ones who have a support system, the ones who have people that can pick them up when they're down. So if you don't have a strong support system, definitely encourage you to take that step. I think that is definitely a fantastic point that he brings up there. And just to be clear here, when we talk about a support system, that can be friends, it can be family, it can be professional help. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you're not trying to go through this alone, right? And Adam really highlights this idea of finding your inner hero is not easy, but it's worth it because it leads to true freedom and self-empowerment. It feels a little ironic to put these concepts together, right? Of inner hero, but support system. And I always remind people, hey, look, even the Justice League and the Avengers teamed up, right? They supported one another. So even those two superheroes, as we're talking about inner heroes here, even those two superhero groups are better collectively than they are individually. After that, we shifted into talking about breaking through those mental barriers to personal growth. And really, we're talking here about the fear of change. For a lot of people, they may find themselves stuck in this cycle of they want change, but then they're terrified to take the first step. And what ends up happening a lot of times is we may double down on our current behaviors rather than getting outside of that comfort zone because we convince ourselves it's easier to just stay where we are, right? It's not until the pain of being in that place becomes so great that we feel like we have to change it. And Adam makes a couple of really great points in this particular episode. So number one is he talks about this idea that that fear primarily resides in the mind, in that the thoughts that you have an impact on your emotional state. And I talk a lot about this, is not just related to fear, but to stress, to just your whole mindset, right? The way that you think affects the way that you feel, and the way that you feel affects the way that you act, right? It's this idea of if you say you're someone who needs to lose some weight and you say, okay, I'm going to lose weight, I need to eat better, whatever, right? And so now you go to a party and people are going to offer you food. You know that there's going to be food there. You know there's going to be an expectation that you eat it. And somebody comes up, oh, you're not having any cake, or you're not going to get another plate, or whatever, right? And it's so easy to just, oh, no, I'm trying to lose weight. But after a while, you start to hate to say that. Or maybe you don't even get that out. Maybe that's what you want to say, but then you think twice about it because you're like, I don't want to be that person. And so you end up ultimately having cake, or you hold out, you don't eat the cake, but then you feel self-conscious because you wonder, what do people think about you? Versus if you have an identity as, I'm someone who eats healthy, I'm someone who exercises regularly, maybe you have a healthier relationship with food and you're not scared to eat a piece of cake. But if you choose not to eat the cake, it's okay. It's a choice. You're not worried about what other people think about it because it's a choice that you're making that's not based on fear or based on worried about some outcome. It's part of your identity. When you have a shift in your mentality, when you stop seeing yourself as someone who's just trying to lose weight and you see yourself as someone who does the behaviors of a person who is healthy, it's a complete mindset shift, and it changes the way you feel and the way that you behave. And that's really what Adam is talking about here. He also emphasizes that fear is really about creating those false realities and the burdens. And I touched on that there just a little bit of you're worried about, oh, what are other people going to think about me? What's their opinions going to be? So often when we have a fear of change, it is really a fear of this unknown thing. And we start to convince ourselves of what are other people going to think? What are the perceptions going to be? What's going to happen if I do this and I fail? And it's so much nicer and safer just to stay where you are and you already know what things are going to be like even if those things aren't great, a lot of times it can just be easier to just stay there. So I definitely want to just encourage you guys to think about that for a little bit. And one of the pieces of advice that Adam gave that I thought was so fantastic, like I said during the week, one of the best pieces of advice I think anyone has ever given is this idea of not just starting small, which is a lot of times what I've taught people, but to dance with it. You don't have to commit to it. Just dance with it just a little bit. It's like exposure therapy. Somebody's scared of snakes, they start maybe holding a little garden snake or something, and they get used to the idea of having a snake. But you don't have to go all in on it, right? If you think about skydiving and the idea of skydiving scares you, then just take the first step of, let me see, where is a skydiving place near me? Or maybe go do indoor skydiving. I've done that before. It's actually pretty fun. And just have some fun with it, dance with it, see how it feels. You don't have to commit to it. But sometimes just taking that first step is enough to help us overcome that fear. So that was the second episode that we did this week on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, we moved into talking about overcoming the fear of success, which is something that a lot of people maybe don't think about, but it's very similar to the fear of change, right? And even the fear of failure. There's a lot in common with these three fears, but they differ a little bit. And success really is about two things. Number one, it's about, or the fear of success, the fear of success, is about two things. Number one, being afraid of the unknown. And number two, being afraid about increased expectations and responsibilities. And more specifically, our ability to handle them. And one of the big things that Adam points out in this episode is when we start worrying too much about the future, we're going to get caught up in those emotions that we were just talking about a minute ago. And he's a big advocate for being mindful, being present in the moment to not worry about that. One of the things that I talk about is the idea that when we live in the past, things that have already happened that we can't change, or when we live in the future, things that have not happened and that may not even happen and that we don't even necessarily have much control over, when we spend all of our time in those two places, we are robbing ourselves of the present moment. And Adam takes that a step further here and says that not only are you robbing yourself of the present moment, but you're creating fear in your life. And that fear has an emotional consequence. And that is what's going to hold you back. So you got to let that fear go. And I love one of the things that Adam talks about with this one, which was you had to surrender every day, right? You just, this idea that you are in control, that everything is just whatever. You got to let it go, man, right? And he says, I'm in the effort business. God's in the outcome business. And that's why he says, I can just stay present because I don't have to worry about the future. I don't have to focus on the outcome and fret over the outcome because God is in the outcome business. He's just in the effort business. His job is to put in effort. And effort happens in the moment, and that's why you got to be present in the moment. And he talks about this idea of he has to surrender every day, right? At the beginning of the day, beginning of his prayer, before his meditation, because he's human. He's wired like every other human, but he wants to visualize, he wants to create, he wants the outcome that he wants. But he acknowledges God has taken him this far on his plan. So he has to surrender those goals and those dreams and those aspirations that he has to do God's will for his life. So that's, to me, just a great way of putting this, right? It's, again, I'm going to repeat it because it's so worth repeating. We are in the effort business. God is in the outcome business. I promise you, if you get that concept right, game changer. And then, of course, we wrapped up the week with Adam yesterday by talking about turning failure into a superpower, otherwise known as overcoming the fear of failure. And Adam really brought it to me on this episode because he talks about a couple of things. Number one, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. Adam said that he's never met anyone in his life who is super successful who has not had failure. It is a part of the process. And if you can learn to embrace the failure as a personal tool, oh man, growth is going to happen. I'm telling you right now. And he emphasizes the importance of learning from your mistakes, using them as opportunities for improvement. Earlier, I talked about how we don't want to live in the past, constantly reliving the mistakes that we made and things like that. But we do want to reflect upon them. We do want to learn from them. So it's not that we can't ever think about the past. We just don't want to dwell there. We don't want the past to constantly bring us back and hold us back from moving forward. And the other big thing that Adam talked about is that resilience and persistence are key factors are turning that failure into a superpower. And I think this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of this episode and really the beginning of the week, which is this idea of resilience in support systems, right? That's the key, because a lot of times we can't see the lesson, right? We miss it. We're looking back and we're seeing the emotional connection to the past, and we miss the lessons that are in it. So sometimes having that support system, whether it's a really good friend or something that you pay for, coaching, it will help you to get those insights, and those will be valuable for you. A couple other quotes that Adam had that I really just wanted to point out here real quick. Every time you fail, you have a chance to learn and grow. That's the real superpower. And resilience is the ability to bounce back from failure and keep moving. So a couple of really powerful things there. I asked Adam at the end of the episode to share a final thought, just something that kind of encompasses the entire week. And here is what he says: to take note of your fears, truly inventory them, really look at what they are. Share with somebody that you trust, because when you do that, you cut it in half. Learn to dance with it, get exposure to it, right? And we talked about that earlier, about that idea of exposure therapy and what the fear of snakes, and he kind of brings that up again. And you can do this. It's a process, though, right? Don't think that you're just going to do this one time and that's going to be it, and you're going to be like, okay, cool, I'm good. You really have to keep pushing through, getting over fear, getting to your goals and dreams, building the body you want, building the business you want, building the marriage you want, is all a process. Adam used the example of a Twilight Zone episode, where this guy's just given everything he thought he ever wanted, and he ended up being miserable because everything was too perfect. And the reality is, none of us wake up one day and just have everything bestowed on us like he did in the episode. But if we did, what we would find is that we'd be miserable, that everything was just handed to us. And that is because we are actually designed to go through trials and tribulations. We are designed to go through struggles. It is how we grow. It is how we learn. Learn to dance and enjoy the process was the final piece of advice that Adam left us with this week. And honestly, I think it's perfect. I'm just going to leave it at that. If you enjoyed our interview series with Adam Jablin this week, make sure you head on over to Apple or Spotify and leave us a review on the podcast. Also, if you have a particular topic that you would like to hear about, feel free to head over to Instagram and send me a DM at Unshakable Habits is my handle. I would love to hear what you guys are interested in learning more about. And next week, we're going to be talking about something that was an absolute life changer for me, and that was routines. I'm going to make a slight change to the formatting here. instead of doing 5 episodes. We're just going to do 3 episodes next week. So make sure that you tune in next week, and we're going to be talking all about those routines and the impact they can have on your life. And with that, guys, as always, I remind you that while none of us are born unshakable, we can all become unshakable.